Hey, welcome. This is another episode of the Author's Leverage. And for those that tune into this show, whether you're an aspiring author or you are a seasoned author and you've published several books, I have the privilege of having so many great conversations with experts in these spaces who can speak to how we can be more successful and really set ourselves up for really the impact and the income that we want when we set out to do this kind of work. So I'm excited that today's conversation, we're talking kind of continuing this theme of like branding and how as an author your platform really matters. And so we have on the show with us today Marissa Eigenbrood. Let me introduce her. She's the senior vice president of Smith Publicity, working closely with all the teams across the company. And throughout her career in public relations, she's worked with nonprofits, Fortune 500 corporations, international brands, college universities, tech startups, and the publishing industry, including small to large size publishers, hybrid presses, debut authors, and industry thought leaders. She brings extensive knowledge to the public relations realm, as well as an organized and dedicated focus to all that she does. And she joined Smith Publicity in 2009, and she began her career as a publicist, then expanding into business development before taking on a variety of leadership roles. And that provided her a diverse understanding of the goals and strategies that are critical to campaign success and an in-depth knowledge of the industry and company as a whole. So excited. Thank you, Marissa, for being here. Welcome to the Author's Leverage. Yay.
Thank you so
You're
much for
here.
having me, Parchelle. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here today. I just love talking to you, and the work that you guys do is just like one awesome puzzle piece and putting that author brand and platform together. So it's just such a perfect kind of blend of our work together, and it just takes that conversation to the next level. So excited to be
100%.
here.
Yes, this is so good. Now tell me a little bit about like just a little bit about your journey, right? And especially
Mm,
now kind of landing in the space of supporting authors because it is a very specific, I guess you call it niche or group of people, special people as we all are. But how did you
yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always have enjoyed talking to people and communications. So public relations was a natural, space for me to fall into. But when I studied it back in college, all those years ago, I had no idea that book publicity was a thing that
Mm,
was even an option for me to explore. And a year after graduating, I stumbled upon this book publicity agency in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Just kind of an obscure little, shop that said, "Huh, let me give this a try." And the rest is history. I have spent my entire career pretty much here at Smith, and as you said, as for my bio, like I've taken that time to grow and touch so many aspects of what we do here at Smith, and I think that what has changed. One of the biggest things that's changed over the course of my 13 years here is that the critical importance of that author platform.
mm,
I know is again such a big part of our conversation today, but when I started here 13 years ago, you could go out there with just like hold up your new book and say, "Hey, I got a book. Let's talk about it." And that was exciting, and that was what was going to drive people to pay attention. But today, it's not just having a new book, but it's like, what are you adding to the conversations? What problems are you helping to solve? Who are you advocating for, or what personal story are you sharing that others can relate and connect to? And when someone reads a book, so often today they want to take a further step. They want to take further action and say, "Gosh, I really connected so close to this content. I'd love to follow this person on social media. I want to go take their course now. I want to have them speak at our conference." And so that has just changed so drastically. And for us at Smith and in my role now, I do a lot of supporting of our team, but I also work really closely with authors on kind of again talking about this puzzle of their book launch and saying like what are all the pieces that you need to fill in to make sure that when your book is launched, that when we're driving eyes to you through publicity coverage, that you're ready on the other side to nurture those eyes, to keep them engaged with you, and to keep them for the long term too. I think that's just been
mhm.
such a big change too, is like how do you, when you want to have that second, third book, fourth book, you're working on, like how do you keep those people with you in that time in between? And so it's just been fascinating to see how the industry has changed. And truthfully too, that author platform has kind of always been in our DNA at Smith. When we started, our CEO and founder, Dan Smith, he kind of saw a hole in the marketplace. So like self-published authors at the time, they didn't have representation, but they still had great stories to tell. And so that was how it started, and representing those voices. And with that, those self-published authors rarely got the traditional reviews because they wanted the traditional, titles to review for the New York Times and things like that. So we had to say, well, what are the other ways that we can get, that message across? And a lot of times it came back to the author and their stories and their voice and how you could share that. And, as I said, it's part of our DNA, and it's so important to where we are today that we get to apply that now to traditionally published and hybrid and independent published authors too.
Yeah, that's incredible. And just like you said, just being able to witness all the changes over, like you said, 13 years in your career, and even looking back to
Yes.
some that started before then. What do you feel like, I
Right.
guess, in your span of time, what do you think contributed the most to how things are different now? Why the author platform is so important? What are some of those driving factors that
Yeah.
have influenced that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two that come to mind immediately. One is just within the publishing industry, the autonomy, if you will, of like your choices. Like you get to do what you want to do as an author today, and you didn't get to do that before. And so, like, you have the ability to choose your path, and and really kind of figure out what works best for you and what feeds your needs and your goals most in the path you want to take. And so we see a lot of individuals, for example, who their goals are, they want to drive new business. They want to bring people into their speaking, their consulting, their coursework that they have. And so a lot of times hybrid publishing is the best path for them because they really get to maintain a lot of that IP, that intellectual property control, make sure it has that brand consistency across the board. So I think that's been such a driving factor of that continued, that emphasis on like the brand and it not just being about book sales for everybody.
Mhm.
That's led to these other publishing paths emerging, and again, hybrid publishing becoming such a big space right now, and continually growing. And then, the other piece of it, I think, is social media. Truly, it really is.
Mhm.
Like, I think
Yeah.
back to 13 years ago when, Facebook was for college students still. And it was, that's what I remember my sophomore year being like, Maris Scott finally
Mhm.
got into
Mhm.
Facebook. Like, this is the biggest thing. And, but it was still meant for college students. There weren't really other ways to reach people. Like LinkedIn wasn't a big thing. And,
Right.
all these different platforms. So I think that's, the access to your audiences and then because of that access, the kind of requirement to be sharing content with them so regularly and to kind of keep them interested in you, that that kind of trade-off of I'm going to stay engaged with you if you keep giving me more information that I'm interested in, I think has really changed things significantly and just put so much more of that like that pressure. Truly it is. There's a lot of pressure on the
Yeah.
author to have to deliver on this content and these channels through which they can stay connected. So I think those are definitely two of the bigger driving factors of a lot of the change.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. You can't deny that. I mean, definitely, like you said, the publishing aspect has changed. There's a lot more control that the author has, and social
Hmm.
media is really changing. Also, access to readers and feedback, right? Like you're
For
able
sure.
to, in some cases, build a book, create a book alongside of a community, which I've seen to be
Absolutely.
the most effective way to do it.
Right?
It's
Yeah.
a longer game though, but depending on where you are, it makes a lot of sense. So
Hmm.
I'm curious because I know we're talking about the author platform, and I
Hmm.
want for those listening in just to have sort of a clear understanding of what that actually means. So, you as a
Yeah.
publicist that has a book, an opportunity, what is it that you're looking for that
Mm.
determines really the success rate or potential for that author?
Yeah. I would say, what's important within the author platform is that you don't need to be everything for everyone. So it's really thinking about where does your target audience live and then what are their needs and how can you best fulfill those? And so that's what then gives us the direction on what specific marketing initiatives or marketing channels are going to be most applicable to you, as an author. And so I think for most, an author website is one that's just, you've got to have that home base. You've got to have that one-stop shop of information. Whether you're a fiction author, whether you're a nonfiction author, whether you're self-help or you're a business author, it's so important to have that page where anybody can go just to find all the things about you. So it doesn't have to be this insane website with all the bells and whistles, doing something that's like really basic and just gets the, your bio, your about your book section, your media page, and what your offerings are and your social links, contact info, book buying, you're good to go. It doesn't have to be a huge, all these kind of sitemap pages behind the scenes
Right,
there.
right.
So I think that's definitely a must have. But again, like how you're shaping that page is going to be reflective of, again, kind of what your audience is looking for too. From there, being present on a social media platform. Again, you don't have to be on all of them. If you're a business author, spend your time on LinkedIn. If you're, if you happen to be in like sports or politics, spend your time on Twitter. And if you're, if you're doing lifestyle, Instagram for sure. Maybe start dabble in the TikTok space. Fiction, Facebook can be a really great resource, great advertising options for the fiction space for sure, or dabbling in Goodreads as well, getting more specific in the publishing world. But again, just like starting with one, so it doesn't feel like this overwhelming thing that you're trying to take on. Even if you're not active at all, if you're somewhat active, but you're trying to figure out how to start talking about your book and your writing process and your offerings, just starting there and really seeing what people are responding to and engaging with, what's energizing them, that will just help give further direction moving forward. So I think, those are two key, like really tangible pieces there. And then I think the third thing I would say is like, what's the action item? So again, based on your target audience, when they're brought to you, what action are they going to be able to take to stay with you? Are they going to sign up for a newsletter? Are you going to have a course where you keep them involved? Do you have speaking and workshop offerings, consulting? Just think about what step can you encourage them to take beyond just buying your book, and and not just following you on social media too, but like, let's make sure there's that extra step they can take. And that piece doesn't have to be perfectly in place, at the very beginning of everything, but just I think having that by the time you're launching your book, making sure that you just got that engagement point ready is really important. And I think ultimately it's just thinking about how are you presenting yourself as a subject matter expert. So you might be a subject matter expert as a fiction author with thrillers related to dystopian worlds and things and fantasy creatures, or you're the subject matter expert in company culture and DE&I initiatives and how it's being impacted by, the Great Resignation. How are you just making sure that people know this is who you are, this is what I can offer in this space, and this is why you should stay with me moving forward. And the media is looking for that too. Certain media is going to look for certain social followings and things like that, but ultimately, that's a smaller group. What they're really looking for is that you're consistent, and that, that's so important to building trust, building that reliability with your audiences, is just that you're staying consistent with your efforts. And that if you start posting 3 times a week on LinkedIn, don't all of a sudden stop it completely or go to once a week. Like, keep that consistency, because that's what people are going to be looking for. I think those are some of the key elements to think about there. And media only helps to elevate it then, and elevate that platform. And it gives you the chance to take all this great work you're doing and push it out there to more eyes beyond your immediate personal and professional networks.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. I hope everyone was taking notes on that, because I was. Just to again see that perspective, right? Marissa's in that seat of saying, we can expand what you have, and really looking to see those are foundational things that are going to be essential that you can begin working on now, or start to bring a focus back to. So I would love for you also to speak to, well, actually we'll speak to both. One, someone who maybe is in a transition point from maybe say a full-time career as an executive, right? And looking to now say, you know what, I've got a lot of expertise. I've got some things that I want to share, and kind of have my own thing where I have just a group of people that I help and support. And for some of them, the thought of writing a book comes to mind. I literally, just before this conversation, was speaking to a woman who's like, I'm in that, transition and wanting to figure out how I can establish myself. So how would you speak? What would you advise that person? And then the other person to speak to would be someone who's at a book for 4 or 5 years and is not doing anything, or it's not, they're frustrated with it. And because I have those conversations too.
Mhm. Yeah, the transition conversation, I feel like I have them all the time as well. I just had one. I'm working on a proposal for an author who is going through that and, share with me like, "Hey, this is I had this like 3 to 5 year plan that I shared with my company, 3 years ago. We're coming up
Mhm.
on in the last couple of
Mhm.
years of this, and he released a book earlier this year, and he's getting ready to do another one early next year, and wants to now add in publicity and kind of ramp it up a little bit more. And I would say that for those who it might not be in his shoes, where you've already got the first book, you're getting ready to kind of step into that process and really look at what's ahead. I would say, number one, get on social media now. Is just start it now. It's yesterday is always late with social media. It's like you can
Mhm.
always be doing it, and it's gonna the more organic it is in its growth in that engagement and everything, the better. And people are going to notice that, and they're it's going to just drive more and more people into you. So, or to just getting started on that social media piece of it. And if you're not sure what to say, just start sharing other articles of things that relate to what you're speaking to a degree, and just add a couple sentences of like your thoughts around this other article. And those are really great ways to just start to show that you're part of the conversations in your industry. I would say reserve your name website,
Mhm. Mhm.
not your book title, because the book title will expire after time. Reserve your name. So
Mhm.
MarissaEigenbrood.com, that's because that you will always be a part of all that's to come beyond this. So
Mhm.
reserve that, or if you've got a bigger theme, if your theme is to, be visionary, like bevisionary.com, make that but like reserve that URL for yourself and start to think about, what we might incorporate in there. I think too, and we actually work with a lot of authors in those early stages where we're giving them that guidance on those pieces. We do it from more of a consultative basis here at Smith versus the full service execution we do with Publicity. But we love to come in early and get a chance to start talking to authors about the missing
Mhm.
pieces of their puzzle, and introduce them to the right partners, who can help build out the other pieces of what they might need. There's so many individuals of our 25 years in business that we've just built this great web of awesome people along the way that we love to work with. So,
Mhm.
but I think in those early stages too, once you've got the social media, the website ready, you can also start to do some publicity early on too, and just like starting to write some articles and just doing some podcasts, just starting to share your voice a little bit here and there, and pepper it in, so it's not a surprise when all of a sudden you go and write this book and people are saying, "Oh wow, I haven't really heard John Smith talk about this before," and now all of a sudden he's out here talking about it. So it shouldn't be new the first time they're hearing about it when the book comes out. But I think just knowing that it is a process, it's a journey, and to
Mhm.
give yourself that time. If it's a thought now, start taking some action and start putting some of those early pieces in place so that it doesn't all come at you in this wave at once and feel super overwhelming as you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out your publishing path and everything too. And I said we love when authors come to us those early stages, because it's like we can talk about all those things, but also talk about like what publishing path makes sense for you, and what is it, again, what does it look like when you're kind of in the driver's seat of the whole process.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And to the more seasoned author, because that's
Yeah.
perfect advice for someone who's really thinking about this, and you're like, okay, what do I do right now as I'm figuring things out? You can always
Hmm.
start building organically, and start sharing is really
Yeah.
powerful. And
Yeah.
then looking at the let's say I call them the more seasoned author, or someone
Hmm.
who's had something out, or maybe multiple books out, that really just haven't, I guess I would say, reached its full potential that they envisioned when they
Hmm.
put it out. So we're speaking to that person, and because one of the things that's kind of come to me, I'm not sure if it's like somebody else has said it before, but I'm like, what's happened with how scripts and fiction work has become movies and all kinds of
Mm.
experiences. I feel like there's another opportunity that's opening up in the e-learning space for nonfiction work.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
if you already have work out, like that's what we come in to help and facilitate and execute for our authors. But how would you speak to in that same light someone who
Hmm.
already has work out?
Yeah, I would say again, if you've got the book out, but if you haven't done those social media pieces and stuff, it's never too late. Even though I
Sure.
said
Okay.
yesterday is too
Yep.
late, but it's never too late. Get started now and start talking about it. But what you want to think about though is that, okay, your book is 4 years old now, let's say. We've got to have something fresh for them to get excited about. So maybe you decide to launch a newsletter at this time. Maybe you decide to launch your own podcast at this time,
Mm.
or you decide to launch your own course, something like that. Like, what is that that newer, exciting thing that someone can be drawn into? That the book is still a resource and connection to, and that kind of business card that is part of the whole experience. But it's good to give a little something fresh. Again, it doesn't. It could be a whole course, or it could also be, like I said, just launching a newsletter. It could be that, hey, is your book in audiobook form yet? Let's do
Yep.
the audiobook. That's a great way to refresh it, and maybe you refresh the content. If it's
Mhm.
4 years old and you're in the business space, I mean, in a lot of different spaces. Let's say in the business space, I'm going to say there's probably, because of the last 2 years, there's probably some big updates that could be made to your books. It was a time for a second edition to
Mm.
think about with the book. I think certain things like that make you kind of think about, okay, that's like a whole other book launch. Am I jumping into it? But again, there's probably a lot of updates that can be made, or do you just start writing like a regular blog that you're driving people to? But just something that feels new and fresh that you can add into your overall platform and your brand, I think is important at that stage. And again, you can start doing LinkedIn lives all of a sudden. You can just like add something that feels fresh for people to start engaging with.
I love this. And what I love the fact that you all at Smith, you all offer, I think it's bi-monthly webinars and just
Hmm.
insights on these kind of informations, bringing
Yeah,
in a lot of different experts. And so could you talk a little bit about that too? So that way, now in the
sure.
conversation, because there's so much, like I'm taking notes, like, so I want
Yeah.
others to know that like this could be something that you
Yeah.
experience more regularly if you're trying to think and really have that support in place. So yeah, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to do that, Parcelle. And I think, we really, it's kind of part of our values at Smith is to educate, to provide information. So even if we're not a good fit, we only take on about 10% of the authors that come to us. But we love to review each one and find, is it a good fit? What's unique about it that could be a good fit for us? But those that we don't get to work with, if we're not just sending them in the direction of another great publicity team, we love to just provide education, provide resources. So our webinar series is one piece of that. We launched it this year in honor of our 25th anniversary, and we're doing them every other month. We do have one coming up in 2 weeks called What Media Wants. It's really exciting. We have someone from Fox Philadelphia, a producer, as well as someone from Business Insider, who are coming in to talk with our publicity manager, Andrea, about kind of what's going on in the media. What are they looking for with experts and authors today? And talking about the trends and the timely conversations. So, we'll be sharing more about that through my LinkedIn. So you can definitely find that. Beyond the webinar too, we're regularly sharing new information through our podcast. We've got a great blog. We've got a monthly newsletter too. So there's just a lot of different channels, social channels too, that'll direct you to a lot of that content. So I always encourage just like follow us on social and you'll hear about those things that are going on. And you can find kind of what do you need? What information are you looking for? If you search through our blog, you're probably going to find an article about it after all these years.
I love that. And I love that we have a common value for sure in education, and we're
Mhm.
a little bit younger than Smith, but we're excited just to be sharing. And one of those ways is through our podcast too. So really, really appreciate that and that you all offer that. So a couple other questions I have for you before we
Sure.
before we go. One is what do you see for, I should say, the future of publishing and sort of a
Mm.
future world for authors? Like, what is it that you're seeing coming ahead? I would say from the perspective of, oh my God, I'm really excited about this, and I'm a little concerned about these things. Like,
Yeah,
what would you say is like,
yeah.
when you look forward, let's say 5 years, 10 years. Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5, 10
Oh my
years out.
gosh, right? 10 years. What does 2032 look like? It's just crazy to think about. Oh my gosh. Well, I think some of the positive things I think is only going to continue to be the control the author has over their journey. And I just am excited to see that continue to grow. And all of these, like, within the publishing world, I've loved seeing not just the hybrids and like these like kind of three main buckets of traditional hybrid self-published emerged, but now it's getting into like it's niching itself down more and more and more, and you're getting like, here's this hybrid publisher, but they specialize in mind body spirit titles, and here's like, so when you're working with
Mm,
them, you're getting a group that just knows that world to such an extent, and they can get you in front of those spaces that are potentially going to make a bigger difference than if you were just, focusing on the bigger 30,000 foot view of things. And so
Hmm.
I'm excited to see that continue, like just the publishing world continue to niche down in those ways. And I think there's so much opportunity that lies ahead for that to continue happening. Um, I think that from like a concerned standpoint, I just think from like as a publicist and as marketers, I think it's like all of the options that are available out there to connect with. Like now, okay,
Oh,
for the longest time we got to focus on radio, TV, magazines, newspapers. And then these podcast things started showing up and these blogs and okay, now we're going to move into that. And then it became like bookstagrammers and booktubers and book talkers and
uh-huh.
all of them. So how are we taking advantage of those? Now we're getting into more newsletters and substacks. And so for us it's like where are we putting our energy and the investment that the authors are making with us to be as impactful as possible for our authors? And then how many spaces do they need to be in? Like where is their true return on energy in the end? How are they, like where do they need to spend their time? And I think that is a territory that we're going to have to really navigate is, you are going to be expected to kind of be in a lot of different places at once. And
Yeah.
how do you manage your time when most authors are not doing it full time and they've got a 9 to 5, if not longer than that job, and they've got a family at home and they've got all these things to figure out. And now we need you to be, creating TikTok videos every day, and you need to write an article, and then we need you to do a podcast interview, and then we need you to do that. And it's like, I think that's like, how do we keep that zeroed in? And certainly again, the target audience will be helpful in that. But I think it's always being cautious of like not jumping into the trends too quickly and making sure we're really thinking about like where that return on energy is coming in strongest.
Yeah, 100%. It's just so interesting. I've had similar thoughts too, just especially around the future side of things. But even now,
Hmm.
I feel overwhelmed with how many access points there are, like you just mentioned, and
Yeah,
to think that there could be more. Yeah, that's a
right.
little concerning.
I
But
know, I know.
it's inspiring though. I have to say that just to see how, like, essentially what is built around a book, like that excites me.
Hmm.
Whether it's community, whether it's programs, whether it's just workshops, live events. I mean, it's really, really interesting to see. So I'm curious from your
Yeah.
standpoint, who or what type of project from a book, when you look at this whole, basically like a land mass around it of just
Uh-huh.
like a theme park, let's say, like what project have you seen that you're like, wow, that is so cool, like what they did with
Yeah.
this theme or this book?
Yeah, one that always comes to mind for me, it has a very special place in my heart. I think you and I talked about this before, Parshell. So we had the opportunity to work with the former CEO of Campbell Soup uh, back in 2020. Of course, his book came out in March of 2020. He still made the best of it, even though it was right in the midst of the start of the pandemic. But his name is Doug Conan, and we worked with Doug on the launch of his book called The Blueprint. It was his second book. And he was publishing through Wiley's, through the traditional publisher, specialized traditional publisher. And what I have loved seeing, because I'm still connected with Doug and his team through their newsletters and through everything. And before the book came out, they had these different workshops and things that you could participate in and sign up for, which were already great. But what they've done since then is they're really good about staying consistent on social media, but they've also launched these different like leadership summits. They're bringing in other voices and other experts, and they're just having all these awesome connection points that just feel so authentic to his brand. And he's bringing the right people to that just elevate what he talks about to this other level, and it just feels so authentic to who he is and what he focuses on in his content. And I've just loved seeing that since 2020, like how they've continued to just add like little bits to it. Every year there's like just a little something new
Mm.
with each new initiative that they're rolling out. And that's just one that I've always kind of look at it that this is an awesome, no pun intended, blueprint, the name of his book. Like it really is a great blueprint for others to follow. And knowing too that you don't have to have all the answers and everything in place by publication date. That like
Mm.
the life of a book can go on for years after it comes out if you just keep adding these other elements and other experiences to your platform after that. And that's exactly what he's done. So now we're 2 years beyond the book launch, and the book and this conversation around the blueprint has so many more meanings to it, but the book's always at the heart and the core of all of them in the end.
Yes, yes, absolutely. One of the things that I teach is like your book is like the Eiffel Tower, right? The Eiffel Tower
Mm.
only makes but so much money as itself as a monument, but what like
Right.
look at all the stuff that's happening around it. Like
Yes.
take selfies with it, you like eat at the cafes around, like they're killing it out there, just
Right,
doing all around it.
right.
So,
I
so it's
love that
awesome.
analogy.
Yeah. So, Marissa, thank you so much again for being here. I want to open it up one last time for any like last parting words that you have. And then one question that I love asking is, what is your one word? So we're in a space
Mm,
where like we're
gosh.
using a lot of words, but if we were to simplify it down as sort of your message from you to the world, what would that one word be?
Yeah, I would say my one word, and this is kind of a conversation I'm having recently, but it's support. I think that it's important that we support ourselves in who we want to be advocates for ourselves, know how to say no sometimes to things, but support each other. And like, I love to support our team. I love to support authors. I love to see other authors supporting each other and lifting each other up. And I just think that we're in a world right now that can so benefit from as much support as possible. So that's my word right now.
I love that. I love that. And
Thank
that's
you.
like a great parting advice too, is like support
Right?
each other. We need each other.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
talk to each other, get ideas from each other. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Like, there's a reason that some authors have been successful. Reach out to them on LinkedIn. Hey, say, "Hey, can I talk about your experience and learn from you?" And they'll probably say yes. And if they don't, it's like dating. They say no, move on to the next one.
Right, right. So simple,
So
right? So
yeah.
simple. Marissa, thank you so much for being here. Just want to acknowledge like all the work that you've done just to support other authors and getting it out there. And it just means a lot to be connected with other people who want to do that in their own unique way. So just excited to be connected with you and to see the amazing stuff
Likewise.
that's coming down the pike. So yeah,
Thank you so much, Parchelle. It's been such a great opportunity to get to meet you and talk with you about everything, and just to have you again as a wonderful resource and a great industry friend through this. And again, on the support piece of it, if I can be of help to anyone, please feel free to reach out to me directly, connect on LinkedIn, and learn more on through all the marketing channels I mentioned earlier. We're here to help.
wonderful, wonderful. Thanks again. And for those that are here, thank you for tuning in as well. I hope this was valuable to you as it was to me for sure. And I'm excited too. We actually just officially launched today our book to course quiz. So if you go to theauthorsleverage.com, you'll be able to essentially answer the question, should I turn my book into a course, right? Is that the path or is that a potential path for you? So I've created a really short and simple quiz that's going to help you identify that and point you to some other resources. So check that out. And as always, this is where we have conversations that are going to help as authors, whether you're in the process of thinking about writing a book or you've already got one out. Like there's so much you can do, as we've talked about, and that's what we talk about here. So we hope that you'll come back and check us out on all the platforms, all the things, the Authors Leverage, and we'll talk to you soon.